We continue to bring you the day's top stories, and we do want to begin here with this breaking news out of the Middle East as we're learning that 3 U.S. service members have been killed and 25 others injured in a drone attack targeting a base in Jordan, a massive escalation in the Middle East. As Trey Yingst reports here, we want to bring in retired Marine intelligence officer, national security expert Hal Kempfer, who always is so gracious and is willing to join us during these breaking news situations, all of these big stories. So, Hal, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Lexie.
Obviously, this is some tragic news that we are getting in this weekend of the 3 U.S. service members who have been killed, 25 others who have been injured. And Hal, I believe this is the first set of U.S. troops who have been killed in the Middle East since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Lexie, as near as I was checking this morning when I got the news, and I can't find another instance where U.S. troops are actually killed. Injured's another story, although I'm getting a sense that the injuries that were suffered, which are rather extensive, 25 injured on top of the 3 killed, that those were probably very serious injuries. Apparently, a drone got in and got right in the midst of one of our troop concentrations and obviously has caused a great deal of damage, not to mention death and suffering that goes with that. This is the first time we've seen something like this. We've seen a number of these drone attacks in the area. We certainly saw them in Iraq, and we've responded to those. Syria, we've responded to those. Of course, they've attempted to attack our warships in the Red Sea and the Sea of Aden, and we've responded to those. But this is the first time that we've seen it's an Iranian-backed militia group attack U.S. troops in Jordan. And this is a big shift because up to this point, there have been no attacks on Jordanian sovereign territory. And I'm wondering how the Jordanian, how the king and how the Jordanian military is going to respond to this incursion on into their sovereign territory.
Well, we've seen all of these visits, too, on behalf of the Biden administration. Blinken making a couple of trips to meet with leaders in the Middle East and to see things escalate to this point. Hal, I think the big question for everybody is, what does this mean for us in the United States? We keep hearing that they've been trying to drag us into this war between Israel and Hamas, and we really have been trying to support Israel as an ally, but obviously don't want this to escalate even further. That's been the point of a lot of these visits from leaders here in the U.S. going to the Middle East. So what does that mean for us? Are we now fully brought in?
Well, it doesn't force us to be, quote, fully brought in further than what we are. But what it will do is we can't have something like this happen and not respond to it. So expect that there's going to be there should be a significant response, hitting positions everywhere with the connected to this group, and probably any Iranian forces, IRGC, Al Quds representatives connected to this group as well. I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, this is a threshold. U.S. troops have been killed, not just mild TBI injuries from explosive shock waves, but this is very different. And this also has hit a troop concentration in a country we've normally considered something of a safe haven. We've operated in and out of Jordan for a very long time. We have a tremendous relationship with Jordan, and this has really changed the math in terms of where our troops are in the region. It's a very, very provocative move by Iran to allow this or to order something like this to happen, depending on what exactly occurred. And now they have brought Jordan into this larger conflict. And that is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's like dominoes, but you do look around the Middle East, and this is a significant shift. I mean, you have brought in Jordan, which geographically sits in a very key strategic location. It's no longer, Syria. I think most would agree is a rather failed state. It's a somewhat lawless territory. Iraq, it has a lot of internal issues that they're working on. It does have a government in place, but these militias do control significant swaths of land in Iraq. And yes, we have a presence there, but we have a very different force protection posture in some of these places than we do in Jordan. Jordan is considered a place that's normally much safer for U.S. troops to operate. Kind of the quintessential rear area, if you will, within the Middle East, not like going into Syria or something like that. And so this has shifted how we're looking at it. And whereas we're going to see obviously a dramatic increase in our force protection posture wherever we are in Jordan, that's gonna go around the Middle East and even further out. It's going to go to wherever our forces are, certainly throughout the Persian Gulf, Djibouti on the Red Sea, which is probably already at a pretty heightened alert status as it is. But it's going to really shift where U.S. forces are in terms of how they view the potential threat that they're looking at. And I think this is going to be one of those moments we're going to use as a benchmark of where the U.S. was militarily in the Middle East, with at least with this conflict.
Yeah, and I guess I want to ask you, going off of that, a couple of things that you said stood out there, but mainly, how is this going to, do you think, really change operations in the Middle East? Like you said, this is going to be a moment that won't be forgotten, of course, but how do you think that could impact things, in the next several weeks, several months, and beyond?
Well, I'm looking at two different levels. One is the tactical level. I can tell you for troops anywhere in the Middle East now, there's going to be a much more. It's what we call a uh, ATFP, anti-terrorism force protection. But the I'm not sure what status they were within Jordan, but I have a feeling that we're going to a much higher status across the board. We may end up doing something, bilaterally with Jordan and also with other nations to improve air defense capabilities. We may change some of the rules of engagement on how we can use those air defense capabilities, uh, over their sovereign territory. There's a lot of things that can be happening on the tactical level in that regard. On the more operational level, it's going to make us. It's going to go into the planning side of how we move forces in and out of the Middle East and where we put those forces in the Middle East. And that's something I could only speculate on. But I can tell you right now that as we're sitting here, I know there's operational planning teams and joint planning groups, in the Middle East and going up through Tampa, U.S. Central Command, probably up in Stuttgart or up in Germany with the with Africa Command, and probably NATO as well, and certainly Washington D.C. all working on this issue, which is what's the proper response, both defensively and offensively, to what just happened. And they're all weighing different courses of action or developing different courses of action. They're doing, my history as an intelligence officer. We would get tasked with a fairly significant deep dive, if you will, looking at everything that's out there, building an array of possible targets for response, a lot of different things. So, and then I would be remiss if I didn't say there's another side, which is the diplomatic side, and there's the overt diplomatic side and the less overt diplomatic side. And whereas we don't have official, we don't have a diplomatic presence in Tehran, we have ways of communicating with Iran. And I think that right now the Iranians are probably going to be getting some very, very direct communications from the U.S., some very direct communications from Jordan, is my guess. And I wouldn't be surprised to see other countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and others, expressing their strong concerns about this. There'll be overt things said, but then there'll also be things that are said more directly that are not overt. And I imagine the not overt stuff's going to be some pretty tough discussion with the Iranians, and they've already had some tough discussions. So there's going to be some options on the table.
Yeah, and when it comes to the response, we heard from President Biden, who put out a statement just a little bit ago this morning, and we'll show viewers that again here in just a moment. But he has, of course, said that he's vowing to hold those responsible for this
Hmm.
attack. That this is not going to be taken lightly. Of course, we're going to respond. So when it comes to the response, Hal, and as things are being done behind the scenes right now, working to figure out what the U.S. does from here, what does that scale of response look like, really?
Right now, that's what there's probably a planning group in Washington D.C. that's linked in with every other planning group at every other level, and they're going through what can we do and what would be proper, and of course the most important one is what the White House is going to direct to be done, and they're going to be looking at a variety of options. It could be, we've seen where we've hit like a few locations of the enemy militias, and and we've actually hit IRGC or Iranian advisors, Iranian supply depots, things like that. In Syria, it comes to mind specifically, but we've also hit places in Iraq. These are all things that they'll be looking at. Of course, you could go to the other end of the spectrum. We could make a very strong statement. You saw what the U.S. did in Yemen. We crossed a threshold in terms of what the Houthis were doing, and we launched a massive attack in concert with the United Kingdom. And I think there was over 100 different targets, or 100 different missions, I should say, on a large array of targets throughout Yemen that were hit in that first one, and we've been hitting them ever since. And so that is obviously something that will be discussed. Whether they choose to go with something on a larger scale like that, that's not just a military discussion. That's also very much a diplomatic discussion, and it's very much a international and national security discussion. Which is, if we do that, what will be the response? Are we opening this? Are we opening up this more broadly? The other thing too, it's beyond just kinetics, beyond just dropping bombs on targets. We're also going to be looking at the backer of this militia group, which is Iran, and what levers do we have? What pressure can we impose on Iran? And the fact that they went after Jordan um, may open up a few more routes diplomatically or multilaterally that we can do things to really put pressure on Iran to back down. And I think that's going to be something that they're exploring as well. And it does seem, certainly when you look at it with all these sanctions on Iran that exist, I mean, it's easy for most to say, what more can we do? But it's surprising. There are a number of things out there that we can do that could pressure Iran into reconsidering its position. And I think we're going to take a hard look at doing something like that.
Sure, and as we're working to get more information here, how we're monitoring social media, and the United States Central Command has put out a statement. They've said that they're, of course, going to wait to release the names of the three service members who have been killed until 24 hours after their next of kin have been notified. Meanwhile, we also know 25 others were injured in this attack. So when do you think we might get more information on the details of this attack, Hal, as well as the status of the 25 who were injured?
Well, I think throughout the day, this just recently happened. So I think maybe this afternoon or tomorrow morning, we'll have much greater detail in terms of what has occurred here. I think they'll give us more details on the actual attack itself. In respect to the families, it's DoD policy to withhold those names until the families have been fully notified and have had a chance to assess what's going on. I mean, that's one thing the military has been doing for a very long time, and we but, and I say this kind of inclusively, is that we understand the impact that this has, and nobody wants to see it's insult to injury, or aggravating what has just happened, if you will, to learn of something like this and then to suddenly see it on television, to hear their loved one's name out there. Eventually, it will happen. Eventually, their name will be released, but they want to give the families a chance to obviously be notified, but also a little chance to process what's been happening before they put that out there. And that's something the Department of Defense has been doing for a long time. I've been a casualty assistance care officer in my career more than once, and I can tell you that there's just a lot of things you have to be aware of when you're notifying someone, a family of an injury, and of course the worst one is when you notify them of a someone being killed.
Yeah, of course. It's so tragic all around, and just interested to see if President Biden will be speaking again, maybe this evening on this, or what we can expect in terms of the White House response. If we have to wait till tomorrow to hear from anybody speaking on this incident, I would hope it's sooner than that. But I guess we'll see later today.
Yep, we'll see later today which way this goes, and I will tell you, I would not that, and this is just I can't say it for sure. But what I can say is, I don't think we're going to wait long before we respond. It's daylight here, it's night over there. And if the assets are in place, if the missions, the targets are assured, if we if we're comfortable that we're hitting the right targets and we have the right means to do it, I would expect that we're going to respond very soon, and I expect it'll be a pretty strong response. Now, it won't be what you saw in Yemen uh, uh, with that first big wave, and I would say that's probably because we don't have the array of aircraft and missiles that could allow us to do something like that. But I will say it will be something probably much stronger than what we've seen with some of these other responses in Iraq and Syria to date.
Sure. And let's leave viewers, Hal, with a live picture right now. This is out of southern Israel looking into Gaza. I guess I want to leave you with this question, Hal, even though we've kind of touched on it throughout our conversation here. How does this impact the war between Israel and Hamas moving forward, the U.S., now that 3 U.S. service members have been killed here?
I think it'll be a discussion that we'll be having with the Israelis, because obviously this is an outcome of that. There's so much going on in Gaza right now. The news today is that, and you can't really say too much, but the news is that it's very encouraging what they're saying about another potential ceasefire. Could be. I've seen 1 month. I've seen them. I've seen one proposal that seems to be popping up over and over again of going up to 4 months. Our interlocutors, if you will, Qatar and Egypt, have both expressed that they feel confident that things are moving along fast. So if that happens, if a ceasefire does go, or a operational pause goes into effect, if we look at the last operational pause or temporary ceasefire, what that did was it basically quieted things across the entire region. We just didn't see attacks coming out of Syria or Iraq. We didn't see attacks coming out of Yemen. That everybody respected that. So that could be a big shift that takes place. This may put more pressure towards that, although I think we're going to want to kinetically respond to this particular attack before anything else occurs. The other thing, though, is, and this is kind of connected to it, is that the International Court of Justice, the ICJ ruling, that was that the Hamas was certainly hoping that they would order a permanent ceasefire or an immediate ceasefire to take place. That didn't happen. In fact, the ICJ ruling kind of reaffirmed Israel's right for self defense, and that may have taken some political and wind out of the sails of Hamas, out of Iran as well, but also limits the number of options that they have. So we might see this will add more impetus towards some sort of hostage release exchange for prisoners deal in Gaza that also results in a temporary ceasefire, and that will quiet things down across the entire region if it stays true to form.
Hal, as always, thank you so much for your time and all your insight here. I'm sure we'll be talking with you a lot more, hopefully, even maybe later today, if not into the rest of the week as we work to get more information here. But Hal Kempfer, retired Marine intelligence officer, as always, thanks so much.
Thank you, Lexie.
All right, so we're going to continue to follow the latest here. Let's also show you more of this reaction that we're seeing on social media. Vice President Kamala Harris putting this out on X moments ago, saying that Doug and I mourn the loss of the 3 U.S. service members killed in northeast Jordan near the Syria border in a despicable attack by Iran-backed militant groups. Our prayers are with their loved ones as well as those injured. These fallen patriots served bravely and selflessly, wholly committed to their fellow Americans and the security of our nation and our allies and partners. Our entire nation will forever honor these warriors, their service, and the ultimate sacrifice. We're also hearing from President Biden today, who has released a statement. He was in South Carolina earlier at a church service and then released this shortly after that event happened earlier today. Let's pull up what he has to say here as well. And this was the statement that he had released, saying today America's heart is heavy. Last night, 3 U.S. service members were killed and many wounded during an unmanned aerial drone attack on our forces stationed in northeast Jordan near the Syria border. While we're still gathering the facts of this attack, we know it was carried out by radical Iran-backed militant groups operating in Syria and Iraq. Jill and I joined the families and friends of our fallen and Americans across the country in grieving the loss of these warriors in this despicable and wholly unjust attack. The service members embodied the very best of our nation, unwavering in their bravery, unflinching in their duty, unbending in their commitment to our country, risking their own safety for the safety of their fellow Americans and our allies and partners with whom we stand in the fight against terrorism. It's a fight that we will not seize. The 3 American service members we lost were patriots in the highest sense, and their ultimate sacrifice will never be forgotten by our nation. Together, we will keep this sacred obligation we bear to their families. We will strive to be worthy of their honor and valor. We will continue to carry on the commitment to fight terrorism and have no doubt we will hold all those responsible to account at a time and in a manner of our choosing.